If you have topics you would like to have us discuss on the Aging Well podcast, please click on the links in the episode description to send us a text or record your message or comments. We'd love to hear from you and how we can help you age well. If you benefit from the Aging Well podcast and would like to support the content financially, please click on the Support the Show link or support our affiliates and advertisers. Welcome to the Aging Well podcast. I'm Jeff Armstrong here with Corbin Bruton. In this and the episodes that follow, we will share candid discussions on aging and hear from the experts. We are here to inform and encourage as we experience, aging. In this episode, we discuss the crucial role of vigorous exercise in reducing the risk of cognitive decline and dementia and explore the 12 modifiable risk factors identified by the Lancet Commission, including the importance of education, managing hearing loss, maintaining healthy blood pressure and weight, treating depression, staying socially active, and preventing head injuries. Like many of the episodes of the Aging Well podcast, we discuss how to take proactive steps to protect your cognitive health and age well.
Now, we may have touched on this on previous episodes, but it may be worth a revisit. Have we shared the Lancet Commission report of modifiable risk factors to prevent or reduce the risk of dementia?
I don't recall this as a specific topic. It may have come up in episode 120 when we interviewed the Kleonskis.
We have talked about dementia prevention in several episodes.
Yeah, I can't cite this from data, but I would wager to bet that dementia prevention is on the mind of most aging adults. What are the modifiable risk factors reported by the Lancet Commission that can help prevent or delay the onset of dementia?
Great question. There are 12 risk factors. These includes low education in early life, hearing loss in midlife, hypertension in midlife, obesity in midlife, smoking, depression, physical inactivity, diabetes, social isolation, excessive alcohol consumption, traumatic brain injury, and air pollution.
I think we've touched on each of these to some extent on the Aging Well podcast.
I think we have.
So let's see. Higher levels of education are associated with a reduced risk of dementia. Addressing hearing loss can significantly reduce the risk. Managing blood pressure can help prevent cognitive decline. Maintaining a healthy weight can reduce the risk of dementia. Avoiding smoking can help protect brain health. Treating and managing depression can reduce the risk. Engaging in regular physical activity can help maintain cognitive function. Proper management of diabetes can lower the risk of dementia. Staying socially active and engaged can protect against cognitive decline. Limiting alcohol intake can help maintain brain health, and preventing head injuries can reduce the risk of dementia.
These can be pretty much summed up with your list of 5. Now 6 things to do to prevent disease and age well.
Exercise and be physically active, eat a healthy diet, maintain a healthy body composition, have good sleep hygiene, don't smoke, and maintain healthy social connectedness.
And it fits with SPIES.
Yes, spiritual, physical, intellectual, emotional, and social well-centeredness.
Now, if the listeners haven't heard episode 124, Spies Like Us, I recommend that they download it after listening to this episode.
Not a bad idea. In fact, listen to all of the episodes.
During exercise and physical activity, of course. In the meantime, let's comment on the 12 modifiable risk factors. Let's start with physical activity and exercise.
That's a great place to start, though that might be my bias as an exercise physiologist talking.
Well, possibly, but there is plenty of evidence to support your bias.
There is.
There was a recent article in MedPage Today titled Better Cognitive Outcome Tied to Vigorous Exercise in Hypertensive Adults that summarized a paper in Alzheimer's and Dementia by Kazibe and others that suggested that at least one vigorous physical activity session per week reduced the risk of future mild cognitive impairment and probable dementia for people with hypertension.
We will provide links to both articles in the episode description, but yes, it appears from this research that we must at least consider the intensity of the physical activity we do to age well.
So, exercise and not just physical activity is critical to reducing the risk of dementia. And any thoughts onto why that is?
Well, let's consider what else is on the list of the 12 modifiable risk factors. Managing blood pressure and maintaining a healthy weight.
We know exercise can support those.
Vigorous exercise plays a crucial role in managing body composition, hypertension, and cognitive decline. By increasing metabolic rate and promoting the burning of calories, it helps reduce body fat and build lean muscle mass, leading to improved body composition. Regular high-intensity exercise strengthens the cardiovascular system, enhancing the efficiency of the heart and blood vessels, which can lower blood pressure and reduce the risk of hypertension. Additionally, vigorous physical activity increases blood flow to the brain, supports the growth of new neurons, and enhances synaptic plasticity, all of which contribute to better cognitive function and a reduced risk of cognitive decline. Collectively, these benefits underscore the importance of vigorous exercise in maintaining overall health and mitigating the risks associated with obesity, hypertension, and age-related cognitive deterioration.
And for aging well. One of the risk factors is also diabetes. Type 2 diabetes is linked to obesity. So, in addition to a healthy diet, exercise can support cognitive health by reducing the risk of diabetes. ACSM and the American Heart Association recommended 300 minutes of moderate intensity or 150 minutes of vigorous intensity per week. Now, do you think we should lean more towards the vigorous exercise?
I think we want to increase physical activity as much as possible, and that some of that activity should be vigorous. Remember, intensity is relative. What is hard for some might be easy for others.
So include some vigorous exercises each week, but how much?
Well, there are many factors to consider here: time, goals, current health status, capability, and so on. I think at least 1 or 2 intense sessions per week. From the research, it suggested at least 1. And remember, intense exercise doesn't take as long to accomplish the goal, but it does take more recovery.
So recovery and fatigue management, that plays a key role.
Yeah, fatigue is cumulative, so we want to consider all the activity we are doing. We should be lifting some weights. We should want to do some vigorous cardio. On top of this, we want to do as much active recovery as we can without causing us undue fatigue.
So how would that fit into one's work week?
Well, I think what I recommend generally is to look at your calendar. What's your week like? What are your days typically like? When are you working? When do you have other activities? Of course, we have to look at what are all the useless things that we're doing in our day that we can do away with. We're spending too much time, scrolling through Facebook or social media on the computer. That could be time that we're exercising. And so how can we increase physical activity? Can we do some physical activity while we're doing that? If you have a treadmill at home, can you get on a treadmill and watch a YouTube video or watch your Netflix show? And so that increases our overall activity. So just moving more rather than sitting on our butt. If we can find a way that, say at work, we're having meetings, rather than having those meetings sitting at a conference table, can we get up and walk around the office or go outside and walk and have those conversations in those meetings? What can we do to just in general increase our overall physical activity? Then we have to schedule our exercise. When are we going to lift? When are we going to do some cardio? Remember, vigorous exercise doesn't take that long. So if we can schedule a 15-minute session, even a few times a week, to get a really intense, high-intensity interval training session in, that's going to take care of that vigorous exercise. And then maybe, a little bit, zone 2 is becoming very popular as a phrase. That's just basically higher intensity physical activity that's not quite what I would consider to be moderate to high intensity aerobic exercise. It's just a bit more higher intensity physical activity, and that's a bit more recoverable. So we want to limit the stuff that's really going to make us so fatigued that we can't recover enough to be able to do more exercise. And we're going to want to do as much activity as we can without interfering with the overall fatigue that we're accumulating from the exercise. Does that make some sense?
Yeah.
It's important to consider that fatigue is cumulative, that the more we do, the more we have to put into recovery in order to recover from that. And it's going to be more calories that we need in our diet, better healthy foods that we need in our diet. We're going to need better sleep in order to recover from that. And so there's a lot of considerations that go into it, but I think it's important that we manage our activities well enough to get as much activity as possible and get the right types of activities to stimulate adaptation.
It almost seems to me that it would behoove our listeners to add maybe like 3 days a week of vigorous activity and then 2 days a week or another 3 of just mild to moderate, and then throw in some stretching on those mild or moderate to add a little bit more recovery to the body. And I don't know, I just feel like that makes more sense, kind of what you're saying.
Well, yeah, I mean, you just want to manage your sessions, and that's why I like a higher frequency of scheduling exercise. I mean, I like to do 6 days a week of resistance training, and so that is typically my mornings. I've kind of shifted a little bit since I'm in a more summer mode right now, that I can do a bit more fasted cardio in the morning, and then I'm doing my weights a little bit more in the afternoon because I'm home all day. But typically it'd be my weights in the morning because that's my top priority activity. And then worst case scenario, I'm squeezing in a 15-minute, really high intensity cardio session in the afternoon. But if I want to do something more moderate, maybe I do a half hour. Or, I'm never really doing more than about 45 minutes of cardio. You got to get out and walk the dog. So that gives me some extra physical activity. Scheduling that each day, trying to find just that small window to get a little bit of exercise in. That's what we need to be doing. And vigorous exercise takes less time. It's a little bit easier to squeeze into our daily exercise programs. And so schedule a few more of those during the week, and then also try to make some time for some longer, more moderate exercise.
Well, you also throw another key factor to the recovery, which is you prioritize sleep. I mean, you have a bedtime, that's a known factor, but I also think like that plays a huge role in that recovery portion of the body that a lot of people may or may not overlook.
Well, and I think food and nutrition is as well. If we're increasing our physical activity and we're significantly reducing our caloric intake, we may be doing more harm for ourselves, because that greater caloric deficit is going to interfere with our recoverability. And so sometimes, as kind of counterintuitive as it might seem, is we're increasing our physical activity to lose weight, we might also want to increase our caloric intake and prioritizing protein first, because we need that protein for recovery, for building the muscle and so on, but getting good, healthy carbs in our diet in order to fuel that physical activity and recover from it as well. So it's kind of a balancing act in there. You want to get more activity, you want to eat a little bit less, but you want to be eating healthier to be able to recover from that exercise. And again, as you said, get your sleep at night.
Let's consider the rest of the 12 modifiable risk factors, one of those subjects being higher levels of education, which are associated with a reduce of risk of dementia. So I guess everyone should get a PhD.
Heavens no. The data suggests that higher education decreases the risk of cognitive decline. That data are correlational. Education is associated with dementia because it is linked to higher incomes, better knowledge of and access to healthcare, and many other factors that lead to better health and aging well. I think it's important to note too is, that 12 modifiable risk factors, it's like early education, is kind of associated with it. And so we often think of, being a better educated person is, have more and more education, which I think is ridiculous anyhow. I mean, I like to say that, when you get your bachelor's degree, it's bullshit. When you get your master's degree, it's more shit. When you get your PhD, it's just about higher and deeper. So I don't want the listener to think that when we talk education, we're talking, more and more degrees behind you. It is just simply reading, gaining information, using your brain and doing those things. But as societies, we have to really consider the impact of education in our youth and how that is going to have an impact on cognitive decline or kind of countering cognitive decline as they age. And so we really have to do something about making sure that there is accessible education to all young people and that it's good quality education. And we're not just filling up time in the classroom and then just kind of passing kids on from level to level without really fully educating them, because that education we receive early is going to give us better skills to be able to better navigate, manage healthcare system, be more employable so that we can have better incomes to be able to support healthy eating, to have the time to be able to exercise. I mean, you have a lot of people who are working really, really hard to provide for their families, and they're working, 2 jobs. They might be working 60, 80 or more hours a week in order to support their families. When you fit exercise in that, it's really, really difficult. And so when we talk about education, we're really talking about addressing social needs as well that are going to impact, brain health as we age.
So it's almost like that higher education, you're adding more years crammed into study sessions, essentially. And so by doing so, you're firing more synapses in the brain, I guess we'll call it. Like you're firing more neurotransmitters because you're absorbing more information, you're gaining more information, and so you're activating the brain. Is that why it would help with dementia?
I think that's part of it. I mean, we do want to have an active brain and it's not just gaining information, because as you know, you can get a degree and there could be a lot of BS in that degree and the information is kind of useless, but it's the activation of the brain and getting people involved in using those neurons that's going to be more important. I discussed my epigenetics test with True Diagnostic co-founder Hannah Wendt in episode 162. Epigenetic testing measures baseline and changes in your pace of aging, giving you the power to steer your anti-aging or health and wellness journey in the right direction. I learned that I am aging well. Click on the affiliate link in the episode description, use the promo code AGEWELL, and receive a 12% discount on your epigenetics test and monitor your pace of aging.
All right. Well, let's go on to addressing hearing loss, which can significantly reduce the risk. Why is hearing loss a risk for dementia?
Hearing loss is a significant risk factor for dementia because it can lead to social isolation, cognitive overload, and brain atrophy. When individuals experience hearing loss, they may withdraw from social interactions to avoid frustration of struggling to hear and communicate, leading to social isolation, which is known to increase the risk of cognitive decline. Additionally, the brain must work harder to process sounds and understand speech, which can result in cognitive overload, diverting resources from other cognitive functions and accelerating cognitive deterioration. Moreover, hearing loss has been associated with accelerated brain atrophy, as auditory deprivation may cause the brain regions responsible for processing sounds to shrink over time. These factors combined make hearing loss a significant contributor to the development of dementia.
So to age well, we not only want to address hearing loss, but also social connectiveness. Now, before we move on to social connectiveness, I just I got one question as far as the hearing loss goes. Didn't we interview an individual with, they talked about the inner ear and those individuals with tinnitus, with the ringing, have a higher risk of dementia? I feel like in that particular scenario, hearing that constant ringing all day long also has an impact on dementia. And so hearing loss wouldn't be as bad.
Well, I think any kind of hearing impairment is going to be an issue there. And so I think that goes back to the Kleonsky interview, which was what, episode 120, where they talked about tinnitus as well. Pretty sure that's where that was. I'd have to go back and listen to the countless episodes we have building up right now. But, when you think of like tinnitus, that would kind of fall under that idea of cognitive overload, because you have this additional sounds that are, driving the brain, and they're distracting you from using other cognitive functions. And, like with, struggling to be able to process sounds and understand what people are saying, that's going to have a kind of a similar effect, if that makes any sense.
So it's kind of like a system overload.
Yeah.
That's interesting because I remember being a student at Western Oregon, and Dr. H actually, he boldly told everyone, he said, your generation is going to be the decline of human intelligence. And a lot of people got really offended by that. But it was a really good icebreaker, and it was attention grabbing. And the reason why he said it is because all the previous generations, they didn't have as many distractions. They just, whatever they were studying or whatever they were focusing on, that was it. They just focused on that. And if you look, like, I use this example to my peers that were getting so offended. I was like, look at it this way. I was like, we just spent all summer studying the human body. And they're like, yeah. And I pointed to my arm and I was like, what's this muscle called? And they go, oh my gosh, I don't remember. And I was like, exactly. But you just spent all summer studying it. We studied for the test, and then we purged all that information to get the new information in. But if you talk to your grandparents, they can tell you that it was a Tuesday on May 7th of 1942. The sun was out, and so was wearing this type of perfume and this dress, and they said these words exactly, and playing in the background, the Dodgers were winning the World Series. I don't know, right? But they can go into such great detail. And what Dr. H was essentially talking about is not only are we so distracted, but we're also, one part of our brains listening to music, and the other part of our brains trying to read, and the other part of our brains also thinking about, oh man, I gotta reach out to so-and-so and send this email. So there's just a hyper level of not focusing and a hyper level of like too much system overload.
Yeah. Well, I think Dr. Hatal tended to present questions and ideas to the students in a bit of hyperbole, just to get a rise out of you and get you thinking a little bit more. I don't think that it's that dramatic of a difference. I mean, my generations before me, we had less distractions, or we still had distractions. It's really more a matter of focus. And, the fact that you guys didn't learn anything in anatomy is not the fault of excessive stimulation. I think, it's the way anatomy is often taught, which is why I miss teaching anatomy, because I taught anatomy as I was taught by Dr. Morris at the Medical College of Ohio, to learn anatomy. And I feel like I learned anatomy rather than memorizing it. When you memorize something, you're not storing it in your brain in a way that you're getting that long-term recollection. And I think when you look at people having a memory, being able to pinpoint specific things in time, some of that is, as you get older, you start to highlight certain areas you remember. I mean, there's tons of things that I can remember very vividly from my youth. There's just certain memories that get kind of lodged in there. And I think it's a little bit harder to analyze that in a younger population because they don't have that many memories to really have that comparative experience yet. So I think you're going to see things be a little bit different when you're older. But from the standpoint of distractions, there are many distractions that we see in society today that are self-inflicted. We need to learn to kind of manage how we're utilizing our mind and clear the clutter and be focused on things rather than allowing our brains to just be all scattered. We need a little bit more focus. And if you recall from when we had the Athletic Republic, when we were doing the strobophonic, we call it strobophonic, the strobe training, strobe glasses, where we occluded vision at a rate where you had to focus in on an object or an activity in order to, say, to track a ball coming at you. And what that trained the brain to do was to be able to process with less information, which ended up freeing the brain to be attentive to other things when that vision was fully there. And so I think it's some of the same kind of stuff, is that we're not allowing the brain to function as effectively, and it impedes on our education. It doesn't necessarily provide for that cognitive overload. But I think you're right. There is a certain level of that when we're giving too much stimulus to the brain simultaneously, it does overload the cognitive functions, and that may contribute to dementia. But I don't know if there's any real evidence that it would be the same as hearing loss or tinnitus or something like that for the brain. I don't know. It's a plausible question. It's not one that I could answer based on my knowledge base, but I guess I need more education.
Well, back to our list of 6 things to do to increase longevity and to be healthy. Treating and managing depression can reduce the risk of dementia. Well, that seems to draw some of the same connections with social isolation, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, depression and social connectedness are intricately linked to dementia, as both mental health and social interactions play crucial roles in cognitive functioning and brain health. Depression can lead to changes in brain structure and function, including reduced hippocampal volume and alterations in neurotransmitter systems, which are associated with cognitive decline and an increased risk of dementia. Moreover, depression often results in reduced motivation and energy, leading to decreased social engagement and isolation. Social connectedness, on the other hand, provides mental stimulation, emotional support, and opportunities for cognitive engagement, all of which are protective against cognitive decline. Lack of social interaction can exacerbate feelings of loneliness and depression, creating a vicious cycle that further deteriorates cognitive function. Therefore, maintaining mental health and strong social connections is vital for reducing the risk of dementia and promoting overall brain health.
And of course, exercise can benefit people with depression by improving mood, reducing symptoms, and enhancing overall mental health.
Yeah, physical activity triggers the release of endorphins and other neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine, which are known to elevate mood and create a sense of well-being. Regular exercise can also reduce the levels of the body's stress hormones, such as adrenaline or epinephrine and cortisol.
Exercise can provide a structured routine, a sense of accomplishment, and opportunities for social interaction, all of which can help counteract the feeling of isolation and helplessness often associated with depression.
And moreover, the physical benefits of exercise, such as improved fitness and energy levels, can contribute to a positive self-image and self-esteem, further alleviating some of those depressive symptoms. By incorporating a regular physical activity program into our daily routine, individuals with depression can experience significant improvements in both their mental and physical health.
Okay, so we've hit quite a few risk factors on this list. What have we missed?
Well, let's see. We've discussed education, hearing loss, managing blood pressure, maintaining healthy weight, managing depression, engaging in regular physical activity, particularly vigorous exercise, proper management of diabetes, and staying socially active and engaged. That leaves alcohol, head injuries.
Smoking. We regularly share the importance of not smoking for aging. It's on our list of 6. Limiting alcohol intake can help maintain brain health. We've discussed alcohol and aging well in episode 68. Wow. We've had a few episodes between then and now. Wow, so many. We've talked a lot about moderation. How is limiting alcohol important to minimizing the risk of dementia?
Alcohol consumption affects the risk of dementia in a dose-dependent manner, with both excessive drinking and, to a lesser extent, even moderate intake being linked to cognitive decline. Heavy alcohol can lead to direct neurotoxic effects, causing brain damage and shrinkage, particularly in areas critical for memory and executive function. It also increases the risk of vascular issues such as hypertension and stroke, which are known contributors to dementia. Chronic alcohol abuse can result in nutritional deficiencies, particularly thiamine or vitamin B1, leading to conditions like Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome, a severe form of dementia.
Alcohol also affects other risk factors of dementia, including poor sleep, depression, and social isolation.
Yeah, it's interesting that alcohol presents as a kind of double-edged sword. While some studies suggest that moderate alcohol consumption might have a protective cardiovascular effect, these potential benefits do not outweigh the risks, especially for individuals with a predisposition to cognitive impairment.
So, all in all, minimizing alcohol intakes is advised to reduce the risk of developing dementia.
So you mentioned that alcohol can affect sleep, which is on our list of things to promote aging well. Alcohol is also associated with empty calories and overeating, which can negatively affect body composition and perhaps even activity levels. So finally, preventing head injuries can reduce the risk of dementia.
Yeah, it seems obvious, but how does preventing head injuries reduce the risk of dementia?
Well, when the brain sustains a significant impact, it can cause immediate damage to brain cells and initiate inflammatory processes and neuronal degeneration that may persist long after the initial injury. Repeated traumatic brain injuries, commonly seen in contact sports or military service, can lead to chronic traumatic encephalopathy, a condition characterized by progressive cognitive and behavioral changes. In addition, head injuries can exacerbate other dementia risk factors like hypertension and depression, creating a compounding effect on cognitive decline.
What can our listeners do to prevent head injuries?
Well, there are the obvious, such as wearing protective gear and implementing safety protocols in sports. I would also stress the importance of preventing falls in older adults. This takes us back to exercise. Remember Carmine's law?
Strength plus posture equals balance. And being aware of the effects of our prescription medication is important as well.
Yeah, interesting that this is not on the Lancet Commission list. The Klianskis discussed this in episode 120.
And I believe Dr. Hamilton discussed it in episode 156.
Yeah, so we've had a lot of conversation about the impacts that our medications can have on our cognitive health, and that a lot of the medications that we even use to treat things like dementia are actually things that can actually lead to dementia, particularly things like anticholinergic drugs. And so we've had the conversation before, and I think it was Dr. Neustadt also that presented it, that we need to have that conversation with our pharmacists, not only our physician, but our pharmacists, because I think the pharmacists are going to know a lot more about the drug interactions than the doctor will. And so when we talk to our pharmacists about, hey, these are the medications I'm taking, I'm being prescribed this, how is this going to interact with the other drugs? How might this affect my risk of falls? How is this going to lead to, my future risk of dementia? I mean, have these conversations, because the drugs that we take and more and more older adults, aging adults are getting prescribed more and more medications without necessarily consideration for how these are going to impact us long term. We're often just taking drugs that treat the short term, but not looking at the long term implications.
Well, I think that when we interviewed David Kravitz and Larry Wolf on super aging, I think they kind of mentioned that people are now going forward and asking more questions towards their doctor. And the number one competitor of all medical doctors is actually Dr. Google, they say, because people have more access to, hey, I think that this is what's going on with me. And I think if I were to take this medication, it's going to affect the following.
Yeah, Google can be a double-edged sword in many regards. Suddenly people, because they have access to a computer, suddenly become MDs, and they're really kind of looking at just a piece of information in the whole picture. Your pharmacists are very well trained in drugs. I mean, we tend to think of, well, pharmacists don't do anything. All they do is hand out pills. It takes a crap load of education to become a pharmacist. I had to take my biochemistry class in graduate school with the undergrad pharmacy majors, and that class kicked my behind. And that was just one of the many classes that they have to take. But, if you've ever looked at the lists of medications, and I forget the name of the textbook, the book that talks about all the drug interactions and, risk factors involved with every single drug. It's a thick ass book, and those pharmacists have to know that material very extensively. And so having that conversation with your pharmacist is something I would highly recommend anybody that is on any medication. Not only how is this going to interact with the other drugs that I'm taking, but how's it interacting with my nutrition and my exercise and things like that? Because, you might be taking some drugs, and I think this was one of the things that Dr. Hamilton talked quite a bit about was, you have these drugs that might affect your balance. That's going to increase your risk of falls. That's going to increase your risk of injuries and, brain injury from, falling and hitting your head. And so have those discussions with your pharmacist.
I actually worked with an individual who his doctor had placed him on some new medication, which was supposed to help aid in some of his own personal ailments. But what a side effect was, which wasn't disclosed to him, that medication combined with another medication that he was taking, if he were to eat anything with just like a banana or a tomato or something somewhat high in potassium, if he were to eat it, it would spike his potassium levels so high in his blood that he would almost get paralysis. Like his legs would stop working and he would just kind of like go down. He couldn't talk or form words. Yeah. And he did more research on it. And yeah, apparently that's what they do for lethal injections. They inject people with too much potassium. And I was like, you should probably get off that medication. Like, that's not good, man.
Yeah. And I think it's really, really important to understand that, medications should be a second line of defense against diseases. That if you have a physician that is very quick to pull out a prescription pad, you might want to get a different physician. If you can have a physician that is going to look at lifestyle and behavioral changes first and how that might impact, obviously, if there is an immediate life-threatening concern, medications are going to be important. But for so many things that we are treating with medications, these are things that can be much more effectively treated with diet, exercise, weight management, and better sleep, and all those types of things that we talk about in our Basic 6.
Yeah. I think that's why we try and promote it so much. I mean, kind of goes back to that elementary school thinking. We were always taught like drugs are bad, and maybe we should have that same mindset of questioning pharmaceutical drugs as well. Do I really want to be taking this? And how's it going to affect me in the long run? The same thing we were taught not to do drugs when we were younger. Maybe we should kind of consider that as well, especially when there's better alternatives such as exercise, sleep, or, better diet.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to get any endorsements or advertising dollars on this podcast from pharmaceutical companies, but I'm not worried about that.
I'll wipe my tears away when Pfizer calls us and says, "Yeah, we don't want to support you guys."
All right. Well, we've talked about a lot more than just vigorous exercise for prevention of dementia. Circling back, is there anything we've missed regarding vigorous exercise?
No, I think we've covered it all. I think we nailed it. So in summary, avoiding dementia is important for aging well. We'll come back to this topic again, I'm sure. For the listeners, I encourage you to keep listening to the Aging Well podcast. Click the link to support the podcast and keep doing the things that we've talked about in this and other episodes. Resistance train for strength and balance, participate in vigorous physical activities, eat a healthy diet, maintain a healthy body composition, practice good sleep hygiene, keep connected socially, and most importantly, don't smoke. Do all these things and you will reduce the risk of dementia and age well.
Thank you for listening. I hope you benefited from today's podcast. And until next time, keep aging well.